Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chaim.
Hey, I'm Adam Chaim.
And I'm Shoshana Chaim, and we are
Propelled by Plants. Today we bring to you episode 484, How Stress Makes You Stronger with Dr. Jeff Crippen.
In this episode of the Plant Trainers Podcast, we're chatting with Dr. Jeff Crippen about the surprising ways that stress can actually amp up your strength. Yep, you heard it right. Stress makes you stronger. We cover everything from family and nature to what really matters in healthcare versus sick care. Then we dive into Dr. Crippen's cool Olympic strength principle that's bound to pique your interest. We learn how a solid mindset can beef up your physical and mental game, making you more resilient and maybe even help you live better and live longer. Trust us, you'll want to stick around to the end of this show.
Dr. Jeff is a chiropractor, nutritionist, and coach who enjoys helping others unlock their true potential. He helps his clients both through chiropractic care and nutrition at his wellness clinic in St. Joe, Texas, as well as through individualized mindset coaching with the Advanced Coaching and Leadership Center. He finds a holistic approach, optimizing spirit, mind, and body, the most efficient and effective way to create a lifetime of timeless youth. We really think you're going to love this show. Don't forget to share it out with the people you love.
Hey everyone, now it's more important than ever to stay close and connected to us as we're going to be making some changes here at Plant Trainers. So please head over to planttrainers.com and get our plant-based comfort foods recipe book for free. That's a $14.99 value just by signing up for our newsletter so that you can know what changes are, because we want to make sure that we stay in touch.
And now for a moment of gratitude.
I'm grateful for our teenagers and our family restaurant, because that is when they connect the most, where we laugh and talk the most as a family, and we just got back. So I'm very grateful for that experience.
I am also grateful for that. We had a great time at dinner tonight, and it's always fun to be able to interact, the four of us.
High five. Jeff Crippen, thank you so much for joining us on the Plant Trainers Podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here.
We're glad that you're here, and we're recording on the Friday of Thanksgiving over in the US, which is a great intro into our first question that we ask everybody. Do you have a moment of gratitude that you want to share with us and the listeners?
So many things to be grateful for, but just went out for a walk with my nephew and sister and brother-in-law, and just, it's a little cool here, but just the sunshine was out, the fresh air was there, leaves are falling. So just a beautiful moment to just spend a little time in nature and with family. So that's top of mind right now.
I think those are two different areas that sometimes people forget about for their overall health. They think about doing it as a luxury, but they don't think about doing it as a necessity as important as drinking a glass of water every day, or 8 of them.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, Shoshana, because there's such increased importance put on what is tangible or what can be touched in medicine. Like if it can be measured or it can be touched, it is emphasized. So what's consequently de-emphasized around that is what can't necessarily be measured or felt. And some of those changes are kind of get into those intangible aspects of health. So I think that's absolutely right. Like it's an overemphasis on, or a big emphasis on things like blood work and things like that, which is obviously fantastic and you get a ton of information on it. But things like gratitude that you started this podcast with, things like going for a walk, things like fresh air that aren't quite as tangible really get overlooked.
And as the weather gets colder, I feel like more people forget to go outside and take that walk, and they really should, because there's so many benefits to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you could look at resetting the circadian rhythm, helping sleep, which I've heard you guys talk about a lot on your podcast, which is great. Obviously, the fresh air is great for lungs. You had someone on here talking about cancer last time, talking about the benefit of just going for a walk and dropping your risk of recurrence of cancer by 20% just by walking, right? Forget running or doing something more strenuous. So absolutely. The list just go, with that in the healthcare circles, there's side benefits, right? In the medical system, there's side effects, right? But in the healthcare side, there's side benefits. So we could spend a while listing those things, but they're really quite numerous.
Like he did his homework.
Yeah.
He knew our past episodes.
We love that. We love that.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into more, I hate calling it the alternative lifestyle, because I think that this is the lifestyle, but other people think of it as a holistic lifestyle or alternative lifestyle. How did you find that?
Yeah, sure. And I'm with you, Shoshana, because it's actually a lot more traditional and as in based in tradition than what's considered the traditional medical system, right? So that's why in the book I refer to it as allopathic, which means against disease, because it's that same idea. We have to reframe or be careful of the words, or just be aware of those words. So yeah, absolutely. How I got into this was basically just frustration and just years of feeling like I'm banging my head against the wall. And how that manifested was when I was 6 years old, I started to get headaches, and they got progressively worse. And I did what I knew to do, which was little, but my parents knew to do at age 6, which is go to the pediatrician. And you take a drug, and then they give you ibuprofen, and then you give you a children's Motrin, and then you get adult doses at like age 7. And then I'm taking prescription medications, and all the while the headaches getting worse and worse. And, eventually the headaches got so bad and they weren't responding to pain relievers. The doctors were concerned about a much more sinister cause, as in a red flag kind of symptom. So they did a CT scan of my head, found a mass, and then had to do an MRI to determine what it was. It turned out to be what's called a benign arachnoid cyst, so a congenital cyst, or there from birth in my brain, and they talked about doing brain surgery for it. And then I remember, meeting with the surgeon. His name was Dr. Wolf, when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and he told me he didn't want to do brain surgery. And I remember feeling, in all my, ignorance of 7 or 8 years old, feeling disappointed, right? Because I was so indoctrinated in the medical system, which if there's a problem, you find it and you cut it out and then you're healed, right? That was kind of that. So anyway, that's what I was hoping for. And then he said they couldn't do that. And so I spent another 8 years kind of looking for answers. At its worst, I had a headache for 2 years. So every moment, every day, nonstop for 2 years. And lots of doctors had drugs to give me. They had an answer, but nobody could tell me the cause. And even at that age, so I'm now getting into my early teens, it's like, how can you have the solution without knowing the cause? Like, that part right there never fully made sense to me. So how I got into this was basically frustration through going through all of that, right? So 8-10 years. And just at one point, it got pretty dark for me. And maybe some patients with chronic pain can release, but like when you're in the middle of a 2-year headache, I decided I'm not going to go on living like this. I didn't really define what that meant, but other than I'm going to figure this out or else. And I didn't really think about the or else, but it was like, something's got to change. And kind of my journey started when everything I knew stopped working, or everything I knew up to that point stopped working. So that's kind of how I got into this, trying to solve this for myself.
How did you solve the headaches?
Yeah. So great question. So the first thing I did was I rebuilt the body basically from the ground up with whole food based nutrition. And one of the first things I did was cut out all sugar and all dairy from my diet. Just realizing those are some of the most inflammatory things that can be put in there. This was 99 when I did this. So now if I work with the patient, probably the other major inflammatory foods would be wheat, and soy might be on that list as well. At least most of the soy we get in the U.S. was genetically modified, non-fermented, and not as healthy as the traditional soy that you can find over in Japan. So, but those are some of the most inflammatory foods. So I cut that out and then rebuilt my body with whole food nutrition piece by piece. And one of the key organs that supported for me was the adrenals and was the heart. So those were some of the nutrients that some of the organs I specifically rebuilt. But it was a piece by piece, and it was an education and lifestyle elementary school course or master course on figuring out what does it take to actually create health. Because one of the things I like to think is you can't be sick and healthy at the same time, right? It seems like pretty self-explanatory. So you can either worry about getting rid of the sickness, or you can actually do the things to create health. So that was my journey of what actually does it take to create health. And as I did that, by definition, I was getting less sick. So it was a journey. It took years, but it was a progressive, steady state upward, and lots of learning and discoveries to that way. But that's what I did. Rebuilt the body from the ground up. I'm a chiropractor and naturopath now. So I use a lot of nutrition, use chiropractic to help that, using that as a gateway into the natural world, which can include some homeopathy, some herbal nutrition, as well as exercise.
So it's so great that you were able to take your own power, right? Take your health into your own hands, concentrate on health, and make all that progress. I'm really interested to know, when you decided to cut all sugar out, how old were you?
13. So I was 13 years old. It was no sugar and dairy. And so I remember looking in the doctor's, eyes, or talking to him, and said, so what's left? Like, that was my answer to what that, I just had no idea. And this is 99. So like, as I started going to those things, it's like, I'm trying rice milk and I'm going to the health food store, which is like the weird store with the, the place
with the
town.
hippies.
And, yeah, exactly. And I'm 13, so I barely know any of this. Like I can't even drive yet. And most of the health food at that point tasted horrible. Like, it's come a long way in 25 years, because there's a lot of stuff that tasted like cardboard at the beginning of that journey. But you just start learning, and you start looking at ingredients, and you just start looking at oils, and you just start going through that education process. And I remember I have 3 sisters. So I have my parents, and so there's 6 of us in the house. And, my mom was great and really supportive. But at some point she was like, I've got 6 kids. We're going to 3 or 4 different schools at certain points. And she says, I'm kind of making one meal. And I hope you can eat it. And there's days I could, and there's days I couldn't, which meant you learn to cook and then eventually learn to grocery shop. And you can just kind of all of those steps through that process. But it all started at 13 is when I cut out all sugar and all dairy.
Wow. And that really got you looking towards a career in healthcare as opposed to disease care.
Yeah. And actually at that point, I still thought I wanted to get into business or investing, or at that point I really loved sports and I really loved investing. So I thought, there's a lot of athletes going broke. So let me try to manage the finances of athletes, work with an agent. So I actually went to school to do that. And I was on my way to do that. After my freshman year, I did a business internship over the summer, started a painting business, and I did really well. But at the end of the summer, I just felt like unfulfilled, and I was ready to drop out of school. And my parents were ready for me to not drop out of school. So we had a bit of an issue there. So I said, I'll stay in school, but I want to figure out what I want to do. So at that point, I looked at 13 different majors, including having no major and creating my own major, and just try to see what like really resonated with me. And as an elective, I took a medical physiology class, which is basically like the function of the body. So it was in the medical school. And I was the only one there who, as far as I could tell, was a big lecture of 200-300 people, but everybody else was pre-physical therapy or pre-dentistry, or they were on the path and they weren't happy to be in the class. And I was like, I just wanted to learn about myself. And I kind of liked the class, and everyone else was kind of having this like college age dread of whatever you have to go to. So I was like a little tap on the shoulder. It's like, that's a sign. And then I kind of followed that sign to decide I want to be a chiropractor. And really what I wanted to do was not necessarily be a chiropractor, but what I really wanted to do was help others in the way those healers on my journey had helped me. And I thought, to be able to help children avoid that heartache and avoid the pain, and help the parents avoid seeing their children go through that, when there's options, when there's alternative, and when there's a whole vast amount of knowledge out there that can be incredibly helpful. That's actually what I wanted to do. So I became a chiropractor. I got a degree as a naturopath. And then I spent about 10 or 15 years studying mindset coaching. And we have a coaching and leadership training center, because as I continued on that journey, it's like medical textbooks will say 60 to 80% of all disease is caused by stress. Mm. And, the CDC here in the US, for better or worse, but they do some stats. And it's like one of the stats that stuck out to me was 75% of all doctor's visits are caused by stress. So as I was learning that, I really had to look myself in the mirror and said, okay, so you wanted to get into this to help people live a better life. Well, there's things beyond nutrition, right? So that kind of launched me into the area of, stress and coaching and mindset coaching and training people in that area. So that it's kind of an evolution of the journey. But all of that started from wanting to drop out in college and then deciding not to, and kind of exploring different paths on the way.
Well, we're definitely glad that you didn't. And you talked about stress, and I know you have your book, Timeless Youth. And as we get into stress, I was wondering if your interest in sports helped inspire your pillar of Olympic strength principle.
Yeah, so that's good. So so thank you. So the book is Timeless Youth, right here. Basically, the 5 truths of transformational wellness and holistic healing, and what that is are the principles. Because, like I said, you can't be sick and healthy at the same time. Oftentimes, health is defined, at least in the US and a lot around the world, as the absence of symptoms. Meaning, if the doctor can't diagnose me with something, I'm healthy. But there's a huge chasm between no symptoms and truly healthy. And then the issue becomes, if we can't define health, how do we get there? So that's what I was always looking for. What are those timeless principles of health that have been true for thousands of years, right? Going back to that traditional comment you made at the beginning, Shoshana. What are those principles? So that's what I wrote the book about. So one of those is what I call the Olympic strength principle. So where that comes from is...
We're just going to take a little break here because I want to share with you that growth is something that happens for everyone and every business. And we've been going through a lot of personal and professional growth here at Plant Trainers, and we want to stay connected with you. That's why we're giving away our plant-based comfort food ebook that's worth $14.99 for free at our website at planttrainers.com, or by clicking the link in the show notes. Click on that, get on our newsletter, because we're going to be making some serious changes and you need to be aware of what's going on. We look forward to connecting with you there. And now back to the show.
At the beginning, I compare the medical system to the Titanic, meaning it is the biggest, it is the best, it has some of the most fantastic technology. Like the Titanic had the best wireless transmitters of its time, right? I mean, it had those, famously those airtight or supposedly watertight compartments. But anyway, go through the technology in the Titanic was cutting edge, first rate, the best in the world. And yet it sunk. And it was the only sinking in that part of the Atlantic for over 10 years. So the question, how can you have the best technology? Some of the most experienced captain from the White Star Line was there, and yet such a disastrous calamity can be taking place. And I think that's a good analogy for the medical system, because that paradigm of emergency medicine is great. And there's some incredible doctors. There's some incredible knowledge in that system. What they could do with blood work and MRI and X-ray and diagnostics is absolutely fantastic. And yet the medical system is either the first or third leading cause of death in the United States, more than heart disease, more than cancer, according to a study by Dr. Null called Death by Medicine. So how could you have all of that knowledge and be so misused, right? Because we have the stats telling us, hey, this thing's sinking, but we know objectively there's some great people in the system. There's some great knowledge. There's some incredible technology. So I compared the Titanic, the medical system, to the Titanic. So the Titanic had two sister ships. One of them was the Olympic. So the Olympic actually came before the Titanic. And as the Olympic was going through port one day, it actually hit with another boat. And they did some repairs on the boat and actually made it stronger. But as a result, after the Titanic sunk, they retrofitted the Olympic and the other sister ship of the Titanic with a double hull. So they made the hull stronger. Imagine putting a hull on the outside of the hull. So if one rips, you're still protected on the other. So what it was is how the stress of the Titanic could be used to make the other ship stronger. And I thought that was a great analogy for the body, because stress can make us stronger if it's done the right way. I mean, that's what our immune system does, right? When we're exposed to pathogens, it gets stronger. That's one of the best things about physical weight-bearing exercise, right? It's called Wolff's Law, which the single most important nutrient for osteoporosis, I'd say, is not calcium or vitamin D. It's actually exercise. It's that stimulation. It's that trigger for the body to say, hey, we need to clean this up. So that principle is about, that chapter goes into stress. And obviously there's, and I'll give you one more story on that. There's a lot of potential negatives from stress, but there's also there's a way to use stress to make us stronger. A final story I'll put in on that one is there's a study out of Stanford University by Kelly McGonigal. And what they did is look at 35,000 people, and they measured their level of stress, and they divided into quartiles, like 20% here, 20%. And they looked at the people with the most stress died the quickest, right? Not surprisingly, the people with the least stress lived the longest. Okay, that makes sense for our conventional understanding of stress. But then they looked at the people who saw stress as a positive. And these people objectively had more stress than any of the groups. And they were the highest stress, but they actually lived longer than the people even with the lowest levels of stress. So they had lots of stress, but they were able to see it as a positive or use that stress to make us stronger. And I think the analogy of how we can apply that is we all have stress in our life. It could be the stress of kids, could be the stress of work, could be the stress of coaching, could be the stress of whatever. The question is that stress in service of what we love? Is that stress on our purpose line, on our mission line, right? And if so, that stress can actually be a positive. It's better to be growing, as you talked about, as growing, working, helping others. But if we can do that in a way that's congruent with ourselves and have stress towards our goals, then we can actually have that stress, but actually it can make us stronger, and we can actually live longer than those with the least amount of stress. So the chapter goes on, there's more around that, but that's the idea of Olympic strength, how we can develop the strength like the Olympic, the sister ship of the Titanic, using stress to benefit us.
And I think it's an important point, because a lot of people don't realize that there is positive stress, and that you could stress yourself in a way that is going to help you. And they think, oh, it's stress. I got to stop that. I got to avoid stress at all costs, no matter what kind of stress it is. And it's such an important point that we actually do need stress in our lives, and we can use it in a positive way to make things better for ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. You've got a shirt, #training for life right on there, right? And but exercise is one of the best examples of that. I mean, I gave the example of bone stress, but that's what we're doing with, oxygen capacity. That's what we're doing with aerobic capacity in the heart. Erythropoietin, which makes more red blood cells, is secreted by the kidneys in response to the stress of low oxygen level or increased oxygen demands. So absolutely. It's like, it could be as simple as use it or lose it, right? There's tons of different ways that manifest throughout the body, but we do have a use it or lose it kind of body. And the more we use it, the more benefits we can really accrue from that.
It's actually interesting. So I work with a lot of health professionals, teaching them about the redox, and I work with a lot of individuals one-on-one. And when we're talking about the body's natural aging process and how we don't necessarily have enough to go around to deal with all the stress that we're exposed to, because we have environmental stress, we have sprays on our food, we have, who knows, we might have mold in our wall, we might have antibiotics sitting dormant in our body from years ago. And then I say, and there's stress from every day too. For example, exercise, and their face kind of goes, wait, stress? And it's, you need to, what's his name with the egg and the coffee? Do you know what I'm talking about? Right. When you boil the coffee, make coffee. When you boil the egg, you're making it harder. You're changing the state through the stress, but it's how you see it. So here's my question.
Yeah.
If you could live longer by having a positive attitude about stress, are you living more healthfully? Are you enjoying quality of life more throughout that too? Because if you're not going to enjoy quality of life, a lot of people would argue, well, I'm not really going to sign up to stay alive longer if I'm incapacitated.
Yeah, for sure. That's the difference between lifespan and health span. So yeah, absolutely. We want not just lifespan, but we want the quality of those years or health span. Absolutely. And I think the answer is yes, because there's some good research on people who found a sense of purpose, people who are doing what they love to do. I mean, one of the things that comes out of the book, Blue Zones, was that idea that one of those 10 principles Dan identified in that book was those having a sense of purpose. And it's interesting, 7 of those, there's 9 principles in that book, and 6 of them are non-physical. Like 3 of them have to do with basically diet and exercise, right? Move, largely plant-based. And there's one other that was food-based, but most of them were sense of purpose, eat until you're not totally full, have being part of a spiritual community, right? Have a good group of like-minded friends, right? So you really see that predominance of that spiritual or emotional part of health that I think is missing there. So yes, I think having that stress, but doing it towards a purpose, towards a goal, which often entails being of service to others in some ways, I think is absolutely a recipe for health span and lifespan. Because ultimately, as we age, and that's what you see with, what happens at retirement for a lot of people, right? Life changes. At that point, do they find the next game they want to play? And it could be the game of being a grandma or a grandpa or a great grandma or a great grandpa, or a game of volunteering, or a game of starting a new business, or a game of going back to school. But those people who have found something they're passionate about and know what they want to do next live a lot longer than those whose game is sitting down to see what comes out next week on Netflix or something like that.
Definitely agree with that. So if somebody's looking to improve their quality of life, improve their health, and they don't know where to start, what would be the first thing that you would suggest they do?
I think a couple things on that. The first thing I would say is really understand the power of the intangible parts of health, right? There's a study out of Oxford. It was in the 80s, and a gentleman named McClare, and he said the body is 100 times more sensitive to energetic stimuli than it is to physical stimuli. So what does that mean? Your body's 100 times more sensitive to the energy or vibes people give off than to hormonal changes. And how do we know this? Well, we've all walked into a room and saw someone across the room and got really excited and like, oh, I can't wait to talk to them. And we've seen someone else across the room and said, like, their heart just drops and you're like, oh God, why did I come? Right. And that physiological change happens immediately just based on sight. Right. And that can happen, in all kinds of different manifestations. And one of the most powerful things I would say around that, and just aligned with how you guys start each podcast, is gratitude. I mean, that's one of the changes I put in probably about 15 years ago for myself. Is I have a daily gratitude process. It's 5 questions in the morning and 3 questions in the evening. But one of those questions is, what 10 things am I grateful for right now? And another one is, what does somebody else do for me that I value and I'm grateful for? And just that power of that single question to put us on the positive, and put a couple stats behind that, which is optimists or people with positive mood level tend to live 7 to 15 years longer than pessimists. So, which is amazing, because things like normalizing your blood pressure, exercising, and not smoking all add between 1 and 3 years to your life. And we're talking about something as simple as changing your mood level, being optimistic, looking for the good in the world, is somewhere between, what would that be? It would be 7 and 5 to 7 times more powerful than that. So we go to our doctor, they check our weight, they ask if we're exercising. Sometimes they'll run a lipid panel, or, look at cholesterol levels or check our blood pressure. But how often are they checking in on that emotional or spiritual health? So I think that would be the thing I would understand more about. And then many ways to apply it. Mindfulness, which you guys talked about, is a great one. Gratitude is a great one. Meditation or prayer is an absolute great one. Walking outside, kind of forest bathing, being in nature is a great one. So there's tons of different manifestations of it. But understanding the power of it and then applying it, I think, is probably where I would start. And gratitude is a fantastic one to choose one of those ways.
Start with the mind and work your way down. Yeah, I love that.
Well said. Well said.
Great. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you, learn more about you, where would you like them to go on social media, or
get the book?
Or get the book.
Timeless Youth.
Yeah. Give us your info.
Well, I'd love that idea, and get the book. Thank you, Adam. Yeah. So I think, I think the book is, the purpose of the book, of why I wrote it, was to help people avoid the 15-year struggle it took me to find this out. So now I'm a chiropractor, I'm a naturopath. We've got a clinic, and we've been in practice for a while. And it's basically, there's all kinds of strategies on how to get healthier. There's all kinds of tactics. Do this. Do I do intermittent fasting? What sort of diet do I eat? All sort of different tactics. But what I found is, if you don't understand the why, if you don't understand the whole picture, each of those strategies or tactics, why they could be great, are less effective than their otherwise being. So the purpose of the book, Timeless Youth, and I absolutely encourage your listeners to go out and grab it, is to kind of reset the operating system, so we understand what is health and why are we doing those things. And then they can plug in the great work they're doing with coaches, trainers like yourselves, to be able to get more out of that and be able to apply it more easily. So go ahead and get the book. It's just actually was released last month in Spanish. So if you guys speak Spanish, it's Tu Eterna Juventud. You can find that on Amazon. You can get that in, if you like local bookstores, you can get them. They can order it that way, or you can get it from them. But pretty much anywhere books are sold. And if you want to connect with me directly or have a question, probably the best way is just message me directly on Instagram. And my name on Instagram is my name, which is Jeff Crippen, JEFFCRIPPEN. And I'll respond to all of those personally. So we'll make sure you can answer to any questions that come up as you read the book or as you reflect on this podcast.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jeff. We're very, very happy to hear you speak today, to hear your expertise, to hear your wonderful life journey. And we really do hope that people reach out and grab themselves a book. Thank you so much for being on the Plant Trainers podcast today.
And of course, we'll link to everything you just mentioned in the show notes at planttrainers.com, so people could check it all out. So thanks a lot, Jeff.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam and Shoshana, and thanks for all the good you guys are doing in the world as well.
Thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers podcast. We want to make sure that you subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platform.
We really appreciate the feedback we receive from you. Every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans, it really helps other people find us, just like you did.
Thanks so much to our patrons. To become a patron, visit us at patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference in the quality of the show.
And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram and Twitter. Our handle is @PlantTrainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at planttrainers.com for awesome recipes, a list of our services, and of course, our latest podcast.
We encourage you to email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so that we can help you improve your quality of life through nutrition and fitness.
So we hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time, and have a healthy day. Or is that too corny?
It's a little cheesy.